Welcome to Air Quality Matters, and this is a conversation with Priyanka Kulshreshtha. She is the founding member and secretary of the Society of Indoor Environment, a policy think tank for issues relating to indoor environmental quality in India. And she is an assistant professor at the University of Delhi. She has been on the editorial board of prominent international journals, including the Journal of Health and Pollution, Sustainability in Environment, Air Quality, Atmosphere and Health, and Environmental Research, to name just a few. She has been the editor for the Society of Indoor Environment's quarterly newsletter, The Indoors, since 2019, and she has the experience of working in the European Union project HealthVent, and has to her credit more than 30 publications in international journals, articles, and conference papers. A visiting faculty at the International Centre for Environmental Audit and Sustainable Development, and has also worked with policymakers in India regarding formulation and scoping of indoor air quality guidelines. With 2 decades in the field of indoor air quality management, with her core domain of work in research on indoor air quality and its exposure assessment, Priyanka is a fascinating window into the field of air quality in India right now, where it has come from and where it may be heading. She is at the heart of an exciting yet challenging environment, with so much at stake and so much potential. You really get the sense, talking to Priyanka, that things are on the move in India, and there is a generation of bright and committed researchers, policymakers, and industry professionals making waves. We had a really great conversation about the particular challenges of air quality in Delhi and other parts of the country, her work in the area around schools and the workplace, standards, and where this all might be going. As always, thanks for listening. This is a conversation with Priyanka Kulshreshtha. And I'm very conscious when I say India is a huge continent and can be vastly different from one area to the other. So we should touch on that as well, that we're being quite generic when we're talking about India. But obviously, it's a bit like saying America, like there's a huge difference. So
There's a huge difference.
a huge
Yes.
difference. Yeah, exactly.
And that plays a very important role when we talk about research on air pollution. I think that is where we struggle to understand the dynamics. It is like in India, we talk about Indo-Gangetic Plain. So that is an area in the north wherein the pollution levels are supposedly the most during October to January. The reason being the condition, wind condition, the temperature drop, the low mixing height of pollutants inside. So these are, and we are in that belt. When I'm talking about Indo-Gangetic Plain, so it starts from Punjab, Delhi, goes to Banaras. So these are places which the cities which are there in this Indo-Gangetic plains, they have the maximum pollution levels during the winters, specifically supported by the meteorological conditions and some activities like stubble burning. Now this happens in Punjab is first to the top of northern area of India, and the westerly winds blow and they bring that stubble uh, smoke to Delhi and the nearby areas. That is one of the reasons that we are seeing a lot of pollution levels increase during the October-November month. So it is a concoctious mixture, I would say. It's a cocktail that happens, and sadly, because it deteriorates the quality of air in and around Delhi and also in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So it's just that Delhi is the capital of India, so it's highlighted more. But as we know, in air does not have any boundaries, whether in Delhi or in the suburbs or nearby cities. But having said that, where Delhi loses control is that it is a landlocked city. So anything which comes inside in Delhi stays there for longer in terms of pollutants. So if smoke, stubble burning smoke is coming in, it will be there for a while. We have our own sources, vehicular sources, the industries, everything is there. But with the temperature drop that happens during October, November time, the cold air settles down, bringing it with it the pollutants closer to the Earth's surface, and thereby uh, very zero velocity wind that stagnates the whole condition. That is why when I say Delhi is a landlocked city, I mean that it is landlocked, something which comes there stays there. So that combined with the meteorological factors plays all the game that is happening for like if not more than 8 to 10 years. And it came into being in 2016 because it's not that pollution was not there, it was not readily visible. We don't agree to things which we don't see. Even as researchers, we don't agree to that. So it was in 2000, November 2016, that in Delhi we realized that when we opened our windows, there was a haze, huge, dense haze. And that is when we realized that this is not fog, this is smog. So the levels had risen much more, but now the concentrations were visible to us by a naked eye. So that is when we started, talking about it. The newspapers were covering, government agencies have always been working on this, but then the pressure was more to find out the solutions to it. Why is it happening? So it is, I think, I'll say last 8 to 10 years that this subject of air pollution has gained momentum, and the problem persisted before that also. It's just that now the public is involved, the policymakers were already involved, now the researchers are working, the academia, we have a lot of dissertation projects which are happening on air pollution. Earlier I remember when I started my PhD, and that is 2002. So I used to carry these monitors with me. These are research grades instruments for monitoring air. I remember taking it to some houses, the lower income group houses, and they felt that I am here to check the water quality in their houses. So it was very new to them then that why do you need to test air, right? So from there to now, we are in an era of low cost sensors, air pollution, trying to find out what is the intervention that will help us mitigate this problem outdoors as well as indoors. Now, the purifier also, suddenly the market of purifiers, air purifiers, has also grown since 2016, because that is when you see, that is when you realize that yes, I am, if I am having more problems or symptoms of cold and cough, probably I'm allergic to certain pollutants which are present in the air. So now there is a lot of buzz around the terminology of air quality, and specifically in last 4 to 5 years we are talking about indoor air quality as well.
Yeah, really interesting. And there's loads to unpack there. But one of the questions I had for you was really trying to paint a picture of where India was as a continent with air quality and ventilation right now. And from what you're saying, it's probably a mistake we make when we talk about a lot of big land masses, that our focus tends to draw towards cities or particular events. But from what you're
Yeah,
saying, there's a real mix in India of both geography and topography coming into play, seasons having a really big impact, the difference between
right.
urban and rural divides, that areas of industrial pollution and rural pollution. Um, so it's a real mix, and seasonal, and
Yeah, it's seasonal.
just like
Yes,
North America have learnt over the last few years that air pollution doesn't know boundaries either. So pollution from one
true.
area can find itself in another area. You know, you were
Right.
talking about stubble burning. North America have
Yes,
been dealing with wildfires, particularly over the
true.
last couple of years. So it's a it's a really complex jigsaw puzzle, I guess, that you're trying to unpack. It's not just specific events or specific areas. There's a lot to play, a lot in play when it comes to air quality
It's
in India.
like we are on the second block of a 1,000 block puzzle.
Yeah.
So we are trying to just move into how to put everything together, but it's too early, too nascent. Specifically, if I talk about ventilation in India, see, the perspectives are such that the houses were earlier designed in a manner where the residences all had courtyards. It was a norm to have a courtyard in houses earlier. So that process helped in good ventilation in the houses. The government offices or the offices earlier, and I'm talking 20, 30 years back, 30 years back, they also were they used to have open verandas, open spaces, and so ventilation. Well, India, if I even say now, we are a naturally ventilated dependent country. So we prefer being in an environment which is naturally ventilated, and also the accessibility and affordability in terms of the resources. For not everybody would have air conditioners, not everyone would prefer air coolers. It's very hot at times, and I remember during my childhood also, during the peak of the summers, we used to just go to our terrace and have a good night's sleep there. So it was a pleasant environment. It was not that it was, the heat has been so much that we cannot sleep. But now it is suddenly we have moved from outdoors to indoors, and that has complicated the problem more. Our movement from outdoors to indoors means that our comforts are not totally dependent on the meteorology, on the nature, and it is also related to the developments which are happening around us. So, not now, but 15, 20 years back, regular felling of trees, cutting of trees in the name of urbanization was normal. We didn't realize what problems we are causing for the future generations to be with. Now this cutting of trees and lot of concrete, lot of roads as a result of development. And if I talk about Delhi and nearby areas, that is what I've seen in last 20 years. There has been tremendous development, new highways, new roads, new places, residences, high rise buildings. They all have come up. But eventually, that has contributed to the urban heat island effect, which is very common in cities. Now, as we go outside Delhi or NCR, as we call as National Capital Region, the things are much cooler. The temperature is like at least 2 degrees less than what it is in Delhi. So the perceptive feeling of 20 degrees and the perceptive feeling of 24 degrees, 23 degrees is different. People feel more hot in urban built environment, I would say.
Isn't that
Hence,
the global story though? This move
yes,
indoors, this indoor
it is.
generation that we've created, and
Yes,
traditional buildings have been built for centuries to deal with the environment that they sat in, whatever region that was. And like you say, and it's the same in the Mediterranean and the tropics, courtyards,
yeah,
outdoor spaces, lots of solar
true.
shading, environments that were designed to manage thermal comfort. And you'd build up resilience to hot times and cooler times, and people were very good at that, but the buildings were generally outdoor spaces. um
Yes,
so what you're saying is there's it's like a double effect in India. You've got this urbanization and an
yes.
increase in pollution, and at the same time we're moving people into boxes and shutting them and closing them
In the
down.
boxes which
Yeah,
are probably air conditioned, and they throw out the warm air. We are already in a urban heat island kind of effect, and that is increasing the problem.
yeah.
So the natural tendency to stay in normal or resilience to bear that much of heat has also gone down amongst the younger generation and the people of my generation also. So the moment we are in a heat, we want to get into a car. The car needs to be air conditioned. The moment we get out of the car, we need to get into the office, which is air conditioned. The From the office, when we come back, we need to be in the home and switch on the AC. So I'm not saying it's wrong in a way, but the our comfort levels have also, I would say, deteriorated, because we used to have more resilience when we were younger, when we were children. We used to sleep outdoors, and we used to sleep, sit below the trees and play around the trees. And now you don't see that. Is it is affecting the next generation in that sense. They are not able to bear a lot of heat, lot of cold, lot of any extremes of temperature. So the exposure, again, that makes a lot of difference. Now, since they are not able to bear that much of heat or cold, they stay indoors. And that is when we are indoors, the problem starts, because we feel somehow, everyone, I've talked about it a lot. The general tendency is that we are outside. Oh, it's very polluted. Let's go inside. We'll be better off. So I don't understand that how can being inside be better off if you are moving into an office which is fully carpeted. If you are into an office which has probably air conditioned, but with the filters or pre-filters which have not been cleaned regularly. Yeah. And these are certain where the pressure, differential pressure has not been maintained, or there is no mixing, there is not a good air exchange rate that has been maintained.
And that's what
So
I was
there
gonna
are,
I was gonna say that actually, Priyanka, like that both in the non-residential, the office space, and the home environment, the perception of a lot of people is an air conditioned is a space is a fresh air space, because it feels
yes,
the association of cool with fresh, it is
yeah,
quite strong, I think, for humans.
it
So
is
so
very strong.
so we feel that when we move into an air conditioned space, that somehow the air quality is better than that muggy, warm feeling we have
Yes,
outside, when it can
yes.
be the complete opposite, in fact, can't it?
It is, it more or less, it is complete opposite. Believe me on that, because when we move inside, we tend to confuse ourselves between comfort parameter in terms of temperature and the freshness of air. Fresh air, even if in present scenario, the moment the sun comes out, the air outside is much fresher, because the pollutant levels dissipate in the presence of sunlight. And the winds, once the winds pick up, we are in a better state. But that tendency of not opening the doors and windows, suddenly cooping yourself in the realms of the room or the room. You see, India, we don't have a lot of heating systems. We are mostly dependent on the cooling, conditioned air. Now, the conditioned air, during winters, what happens is we have these oil heaters. People use oil heaters, and that keeps them warm. Not everyone is able to use that. They use radiators, they use the people who cannot afford it, they burn wood and sit around it. So eventually we don't realize that probably we are not solving the problem, we are adding to it. So winters, the best way to keep yourself warm is close all the doors and windows and sit in a room, without realizing that CO2 could be an issue. If you have a lot of occupancy, like I remember in my classes when I go, suddenly during winters, because they close all the doors and windows, and during winters, there 50 students in that particular room, feels like that you are not able to breathe. And that same room, during summers, the doors and windows are open, it's very comfortable. So the practices, the behavioral patterns also have an impact in terms of seasons. Like in Mumbai, they have sea. So uh, I assumed that, things would be better. But this year, Mumbai has also joined the list of the most polluted cities. So even when we have one intervention or mitigating solution in terms of sea waves or sea breeze, which tends to take away the pollutant load from the city towards the sea, then also the levels are so high. So we tend to, we really need to look into how we can actually make sure, first and foremost, before moving into the indoor part to it, the outdoor has to be better. It
And what?
has to be better.
So, is your sense that, in general, you just said Mumbai has just recently joined the list of polluted cities?
Yes.
Is your sense that air quality is still deteriorating, outdoor air quality is still deteriorating in India, or with this increased awareness, are you starting to see that leveling off or improving in some cities? What's your general sense of the trend overall?
I think things are improving in terms of we are looking at the innovative solutions for improvement. We are trying to mitigate options, but that is happening at a local level. That is not, if I am in the suburb of Delhi and things are taken care of well here, that does not mean that Delhi will be better off or worse, because air anyways, it's a very dynamic composition that we are looking at. What wind is blowing, where it is blowing, what temperatures we are looking at. So the solution has to be holistic. I feel the solution has to be implemented in all the possible areas which are considered hotspots together and for a longer duration of time. That is what we have to look at. And there are policies, there are very good policies, and uh, the National Clean Air Program has kicked in, and they have talked of very good policies. There are certain uh, graded response action plan, we call it as GRAP in India. So when the levels of pollutant cross a certain level, like air quality index goes above 200, 300, there are certain norms which are followed. We need to shut down the power plants. Probably the vehicular traffic has to be reduced. The schools, if we understand the levels are very high to be affecting the health of the individuals, the schools are closed. So that's another holiday for the kids here, the pollution days. So but they are good changes which are happening. But since this is a problem of longer dimension, it will take some time to actually show results. But having said that, there is always a need for building capacity and creating awareness on those terms, because like I'm telling you, this is winters. We do have certain bonfires. It's very common in India to have bonfires. So I think we need to be aware as citizens, as a community, that if the air quality index is very high, is let's say 300 or more than that, 350, then we need to avoid for some time adding to the problem, not going for certain practices which could add to, even by a bit, a drop or two in a full glass will make it spill. So that's how it is. So I think the government is doing good. They have devised very good policies. We are working on them. It needs a more citizen centric approach, I feel, and that will only come when we are looking at more people coming together, and they are coming together now. The amount of groups and activism that I see in the field of air pollution, this is very good. Because from the time, if I say that, talking about, have you come to check the water quality, to people understanding what a air quality sensor is and what it looks like, we've come a long way. And that's hats off to the work that we are doing. Slowly and gradually we are moving there. And I think with the kind of emphasis or impetus this aspect is getting in India, I think in some time we'll have very good solutions.
And it's just as a frame of reference, it's not just about the needed direction of travel, it's about the distance that needs to be traveled. And
Exactly.
for people that have some sense of air quality parameters, um, uh, for perspective, you're talking about very high levels of poor air quality indexes there. Um,
Right.
With risk is that that becomes normalized in some way. So when you're talking about air quality indexes in the 300s, you're talking about particulate matter pollution 2.5 at what kind of levels outside are you seeing at those kind of levels? It's in the hundreds, isn't it?
Yeah,
Part
it
2.5.
is around 200 or something, but
Yeah.
these levels are not across the year. You
Yeah.
don't notice these level across the year. It is during the winters that all the wrong elements come into play together.
Yeah.
And that is when these levels, because in summers we are good. We are much better in summers
Yeah.
in terms of the pollution levels. It is only when the winter sets in, specifically in the northern region, that is when we start moving towards every small inch of action has an impact which is paramount.
And I was going to say, like, that some things are in your control and some things are outside of your control. You can't control
True.
weather. You can't control high
True.
pressures or where a city is located at an elevation perspective.
Right.
Like, these things are outside of our control. But things like traditions and behavior, like you said, stubble burning on fields, bonfires being lit, behaviors indoors, the cooking practices, those kind of things, they can all have a massive difference at the right time of year. Um, but
True.
that's a shift in culture and tradition and behavior. That must be an incredibly difficult thing to start to think about and tackle, I guess.
I think, yeah, if you would have talked about this 10 years back, I would have said, I don't know how it will turn out. But the way India is progressing, we are coming up very good solution. We are taking this stubble, we are making pellets, these stubble pellets which can be used in power plants or in for energy generation. We are using it as mulch. We have devised technologies wherein these seeders come into play and the farmers don't have to burn the stubble. So there are solutions which are coming up, and in last 10 years I'm very proud to say things have moved very rapidly in India. We are actually very, very concentrated on what the solution is. Talk problem is always there, but are we concerned about solutions? Yes, we are concerned about solutions. Now what we are moving towards is making these solutions sustainable. We really need to make them sustainable because solutions are there, and we have amazing set of entrepreneurs who are coming up. They are designing good products which help these stubble turn them into these mulch or manure. They are developing them into pellets. So we are going into that phase of very good phase of circular economy, where we are using all the waste that is coming and utilizing. The problem of stubble burning started because it is a waste. For the farmer, it is a waste. So how do that waste gets treated? If it is treated at source, the problem will be resolved. So hence I think the way the technology, the entrepreneurial spirits in India and the innovation is moving, and the younger generation is driving this forward. I am hopeful that I think in some time we'll be much better in we are in much better place than 6 years back. We'll be much better place again.
Uh,
We should be able to overcome that.
One of the universal truths of air quality and health outcomes appears to be that it always affects the most vulnerable in society the most. We see the poorest and the
Right.
most exposed
True.
suffer the most, and I'm guessing that's the same in Delhi and India in general. That there are specific circumstances for the vulnerable that make them more exposed than others. Would that be fair to say?
If I put it into perspective with my doctoral research, when I did it, started in 2002, I did my monitoring in 2004. Um, that is the time when biomass fuel was cheap and readily available. And people thought that let's save on the cleaner fuel and then go for biomass fuel. Now, that paradigm shift which has happened in these many 20 years, 2 decades, is that the government has come up with the very good policies in terms of Pradhan Mantri Yojana for cleaner fuels. So they provide these cleaner fuels in terms of liquefied petroleum gas to the poor at a very subsidized rate. Now, this has, you know, changed the behavior or the pattern. People know that, probably earlier LPG used to cost more, and that was a deterrent for the poor people to use it. And they would only go for wood smoke or cow dung smoke, chulhas. That is what they used to be working on. But now these energy efficient cook stoves have come into foray. The government is disseminating or distributing these cook stoves in areas where you don't get this supply of liquefied petroleum gas. In our urban built environment, in places where people can afford it, we have shifted to the PNG. So things have moved to the cleaner part of the fuel, and the government has taken steps in terms of vehicular pollution also. We have jumped from Bharat stage 4 to Bharat stage 6. So the cleaner fuel has come into play. We have, the government has come up with a policy wherein a petrol car has to be discarded in 15 years. It cannot run in Delhi and NCR. So these are smaller but very important steps which are coming into play, which in the long run will surely show the results. And this, especially this, the schemes of using cleaner fuels as a subsidized rate has made a lot of impact amongst the poor. Because I remember one very important incident when I was doing my PhD. So this lady had access to the gas stuff and the clean stuff, LPG, but she thought that anyway we have this tree around us. Let's break the branches, put some fire, and we can put it on. Here we called it as chula. Now, for her, one day of saving means at least saving 15-20 rupees, which is good enough for her if she's getting something for free. Now, since the cleaner fuels are subsidized, they don't think that way. So the behavior patterns have also shifted. They are looking at what are the positives of looking at cleaner fuels. And in terms of their health, also, it's not just about the economy, it was also in terms of the women cooking on chulas. They were exposed to PM 2.5 levels of around 2000 microgram, and that I have recorded in my study.
Wow.
If you are and it was astonishing because she was unaware that she is being exposed to those levels, and she's cooking with those biomass fuels and very merrily be sitting there in that environment for a long time. Now, shifting there to this, the moment they shifted from that to the liquefied petroleum gas, as we call it as LPG, the levels have gone down. It is not as high as it used to be. The problem of particulate PM 2.5 has more or less been resolved. So our dependency on these chulhas has gone down. Thereby, the poor can still now afford a cleaner fuel. That has been a transitional change.
So one of the main challenges was the direct exposure to combustion products from cooking and
Yes.
heating in spaces. A lot of the other challenges we see in public and social housing throughout the rest of the world is down to the quality of housing and the density of occupation of those types
True.
of properties, because it's not just combustion pollutants we're concerned about, it's bioeffluents and VOCs and other chemicals and
True.
formaldehydes and radon and you name it, and
Yes.
the more tightly you pack people into a small box, the more exposed they generally are.
True that.
Are there some is there some equally low hanging fruit to the combustion devices in India with general housing conditions? Do you think is there some areas that are in focus for you when it comes to improving people's lives?
I think in terms of improving the health, now when we are talking about specifically indoor air pollution, the people who are using combustion products, they are being exposed to these very high levels of PM 2.5, other volatile organic compounds, formaldehyde. But the point is that during my doctoral study, I tried to understand what impact does the socioeconomic strata has on the exposure of the people who are residing in these residences. So, and I was amused to find the results because, as I'm telling you, this lady was exposed to these high levels of PM 2.5. I was assuming that and in the middle and higher income group household in the urban built environment, the levels would not be so high. And I was right, they were not so high. But the problem was instead they were constantly uh, high, not as high. This is like I'm talking about 2000 microgram peaks, but for a smaller duration. Here, they were consistently, let's say, 600 microgram across the day. Now, that was something astonishing. The reason being that in the better affluent households, there are more women or they are help which are who are moving around, working in the places, and having said that, they have accessibility to different comfort aspects like air conditioners, and that feeling that they tend to close the rooms more with the number of people which is high and the room being closed. The dependency on the help on using the chimney and all, I think uh, we are still at a very nascent stage to understand in terms of health what is more harmful, that peak which went for an hour or two, or that constant higher level of 600 microgram per meter cube for 8 to 10 hours.
That's a really
So
interesting point, and that difference between acute exposure and chronic exposure. What is what what's more damaging, long
harmful.
term, harmful,
Yes,
long term? Frequent exposure to short term spikes,
true,
or long
true.
term chronic exposure permanently, and perhaps an interesting window for the future as more people lives quality of life is improved, and perhaps they
Hmm.
move towards more mechanical systems and air conditioning, that you may be removing acute spikes of exposure to certain
Yeah,
pollutants and introducing chronic long-term exposure by the way
long term
people live.
exposures.
Yeah, that's really
True.
fascinating.
Yeah. So that's exactly. Now we had a very good study that we did it. Ironically, just before COVID happened, we had this study from October 2019 to February 2020, and wherein we tried to assess various microenvironments, including schools, colleges, hospitals, offices, to under cinema halls, malls, restaurants, to understand how the dynamics come into play. Now, what we noticed was that the levels of different pollutants in different microenvironments rise at different levels. So I cannot say that I'm teaching in college, so probably that's a naturally ventilated place, so it will be better off. It gets closed at night. If you have new furniture, you're using chalk dust, and yes, that was important. Chalk dust is an important aspect, especially in schools, wherein we have these green boards, and we write on the teachers do write on the blackboard. The kids are sitting very close to the blackboard area. Their exposure, and once the teacher leaves, there is a whole line of this chalk dust below. So every time the kids go out, kids come in, or there is any kind of activity, there is a regular resuspension of this chalk dust. Now, this chalk is calcium carbonate. So, if a child during winters, and these are, very, very intriguing research questions and research ideas, which I still have. During winters, when mostly the doors and windows are closed, especially in northern region of India, and the kids are going out, they are coming in, and then again closing the doors and windows, it would be interesting to see their exposure in those 4 months in terms of disability adjusted life years. Is the absenteeism increasing? Are the students falling more ill? Is it that they feel suffocated, or they feel like they need to, mm, uh, they are more in the having those sick building syndrome symptoms over a period of time? So it these are some research questions that come to my mind when I talk about it. But having said that, um, the three vulnerable locations in Delhi specifically, we monitored around 37 locations. This study was done in association with Circa at IIT Delhi. And we found out that the three microenvironments which were of most prime importance for us were schools, colleges, and the hospitals, all of which, in terms of human exposure, have a vulnerable population in them. So, and all the priority pollutants, if I talk about, they were PM10, PM2.5, and TVOC, total volatile organic compounds. So now the idea is to understand, because that was the period of winters during uh, in Delhi. This study was done in Delhi. So this is a winter period I'm talking about. It would be really interesting to see in the same place, if we monitor during summers, what will be the dynamics of these three priority pollutants that I'm talking about: PM10, PM2.5, and total volatile organic compounds. Also, I have realized CO2 plays it, we don't put it under pollutant, it's a surrogate index for ventilation. So, levels of CO2 needs to be monitored. We somehow tend to neglect it, but having said that, we are a good population country. So, especially in the public places, we should have, if we can look at, airports do have a sensor based monitoring display, wherein we get to know what is the level of CO2 in that particular airport. But taking a lead from there, if we can have it in all the public places, it will generate awareness. It will also bring CO2 as a highlight, especially in high occupancy areas.
And
So
also,
that,
as we've seen, in the non-residential spaces, one of the values of monitoring CO2 is it can break that assumption that an air-conditioned space is a well-ventilated space, because
exactly
you can go into a well air-conditioned meeting room and see very high levels of CO2, and it's an instant red
true.
flag for people to say, you know, the air quality isn't necessarily so good. Do you think there's a chance that, we're seeing it in many countries in Europe, for example, that
Yes.
governments are starting to mandate the displaying of at least CO2 monitoring in a lot of
Right.
public spaces. Do you think that's something
Mhm.
that could gain some traction?
Yes, I totally think, and I think government is working towards this also, because they have put forward an indoor air quality guidelines for India in the National Clean Air Program. So they have started working on it. They have we have submitted a report on what could be the priority pollutants and what could be the interim guidelines for indoor air quality in India with the Central Pollution Control Board in 2022. The National Green Tribunal is also very active in India, and they had in April 2022 passed an order that all the public spaces in India should be monitored for indoor air quality. So I think that's a very good welcome step for all the work that we were doing, because there are some places, and some places like schools, colleges, schools specifically, and hospitals, that I feel they should have it, because um, both occupy the most vulnerable population. We have kids of like 3 4 years going in schools, and they are being, exposed to certain levels. The parents, it's the right to breathe good air. so that the parents should get to know what air is my child breathing.
And you did some study work around exposure to things like traffic pollution in and around schools, didn't you? And developing
Schools, yeah.
guidance for children. Can you tell me about that? What was that piece of work about?
Yeah, that was the work that we did in collaboration with PGMIR Chandigarh and University of Surrey, wherein we tried to understand the exposure levels of kids who are studying in schools which are near to the main roads or high traffic areas. If And it is generally like that whenever there is a school, the people come, the parents come to drop them, they have their car engines on, it stays there for a while, therein increasing the levels of pollution in and around that vulnerable area. So the idea was to find what could be the mitigation strategies to avoid that. So we came up with very good options of putting these um, trees, certain species of trees and bushes. And this was a norm in India. And sadly, we are going back to what we were. So these bushes are there which block the way or the route of these traveling of these pollutants from the high traffic zone to the school. Now, schools in India have a good big, generally, they have a good big ground around them. Right. So the idea was to identify which are the areas where the pollution comes from, probably the places where the parents park their cars, or they are the engines are running and they are just dropping off the kids, and try to put the right species of trees, bushes, plants to create a virtual wall, a green wall, which can avoid the level of particulate which travels from that area to the school, and reduce the exposure of the kids from that particulate concentration. Also, we did one of my colleagues also did a study, similar study in Delhi, that was way back, wherein she tried to monitor the levels of particulate in a school. That school was also very near to the main road. So the classes which were closer to the main road reported higher levels of particulate than the classes which were away from the main road. So if we can create any kind of blockade, or we can put a gamut of trees or bushes which can block the influx of these pollutants from the main road to the uh, schools, to the classrooms, I think we should be, even by a small percentage, it should be good.
Yeah, yeah, and greening in general doesn't do any harm, as you said. There's been a propensity to remove trees and plants
Yes,
from our
yes.
urban areas, so that it helps with shading and cooling and everything else that goes with it. Were you able to evidence some benefits of doing that? Were you able to show outcomes
I
from that kind of work?
No, I think it has happened very recently. It will take some time to, you know, actually see the outcomes. And the outcomes will come in a very indirect form. We really need to identify how do we see the outcomes. Like if we are monitoring, like one of the schools, they are monitoring air quality, indoor air quality in their schools. So the outcome that we are looking at is, one way is looking at the absenteeism, the rate of falling ill in the kids, and any kid who's coming, if he has some illness like wheezing or cough, cold, how fast he gets better if he is in that environment. So there are small steps which are happening in some certain schools. They have been proactive schools in Delhi who are working on it. But yes, again, they are quite, you can count them on numbers. So we are looking forward to it.
Yeah. Did What was the impact of COVID in India generally on air quality awareness and the importance of indoor environments to mitigating risk? Did it raise some awareness in the short term there, like it did in other areas, or how was it generally taken, and has it been overall a benefit to kind of air quality awareness in general?